Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's talk about some of the latest headlines that we've seen that have come through. Today, I saw Charles Koch, the PAC that he's built up, has about $70 million. Their top priority this time around is defeating Donald Trump, making sure that he's not the Republican candidate. That plays into what you've been talking about.
Sure.
Have you had any conversations with him?
We have, and look, I think right now what I'm finding is that most of the major donors are giving a little bit to people, but as you can see from the reports that were filed yesterday, but not going all in on anybody yet. And I think they're still trying to figure this race out. I think what happened early on was that Governor DeSantis was viewed as as probably the primary contender against Donald Trump. I think his campaign has, to be nice, underperformed. And so I think everybody's kind of holding back a little bit and seeing how the rest of us perform and see if somebody emerges from our group. And look, that's why I've taken the approach I've taken, Becky, which is the truth matters. I'm saying the things about Donald Trump that need to be said, that I think most of those people, if not almost all of them, agree with and believe. And we can't do this in a delicate way. There's nothing delicate about Donald Trump, and he's not going to go away by, clicking our heels and hoping we're going Oz. We got to go directly at him and tell the truth. And, the fact is, when you look at just his campaign filings yesterday, almost most of the money that middle-class Americans have given to him, he spent on his own legal fees. I mean, this guy's a billionaire, and how about we go down the street, maybe just sells Trump Tower and pays for his legal fees that way, or maybe sell the plane. And he could do that, or one of the golf courses. But instead, he's taking $25, $50, $100 from everyday Americans who believe they're giving it to him to help elect him president, and he's paying his legal fees. And one of the most astonishing ones yesterday was $108,000 for Melania's stylist, and they called that political strategy consulting. All right.
If you look at Nikki Haley, though, she says she's not obsessively anti-Trump like you are.
Well, we can't figure out what Nikki really is so far in the campaign. She's the person who said she'd never run if Trump ran, then said she would, then said she wouldn't, and now says she would. So, let's put it this way. I'm not auditioning for any position in a future Trump administration. I got offered White House Chief of Staff and turned it down. I got offered Secretary of Homeland Security and turned it down. Secretary of Labor and turned it down. Ambassador to Italy and turned it down. So I want to be president of the United States. And so I don't have to worry about it. And I'm not obsessive about anything other than trying to get our country back in a direction where we work together towards common goals of a great economy, a great educational system, and leadership around the world. I'm not worried about anything other than that. But for Nikki, if you're not going to beat Donald Trump, you're not going to win. That's it. It's that simple.
But if you look at the party, it's interesting. The Republican Party now, the Democrats, when they don't have the White House, the number of candidates are huge. We saw this back in 2016. Lots of candidates running. And some of the Republican parties in the states are kind of pushing back against this. California Republican Party just changed it, so it's basically winner take all instead of doing it by congressional district. Michigan did the same thing. There are other states that are considering this because they don't want to have to deal with such a wide number of candidates and try and figure it out and split things. But that makes it a lot tougher for anybody to challenge coming in later in the game.
Well, I'd argue to you that it has nothing to do with the number of candidates. It has to do with the fact that Donald Trump did a very good job when he was president in changing those state parties and putting the people that favor him in control of them, and they've now changed the rules to try to favor him. But look, a house that's rotting from within, no matter how you change the rules, will ultimately collapse. And let's face the fact here. Donald Trump, by the time we get to the debate in 3 weeks, will probably be out on bail in 4 different jurisdictions. Out on bail, Becky, in Florida, probably in Washington, D.C., probably in Georgia, and already here in New York. I don't understand how we can't be talking about that and how we can't say to Republican voters, if you don't want a Democratic president again in 2025, why do you think independent voters in a general election will vote for someone who is out on bail and probably during the general election facing at least 1, probably 2 trials, which could subject him to prison time? I mean, so, Nikki Haley can call that whatever she likes. I'm a former prosecutor. I know what he's facing. He goes to trial on that documents case in May, and he's convicted. There is a presumption of jail time. Presumption. So, you know, if that's telling too much of truth to make someone like her uncomfortable, then she probably doesn't belong in this business.
But given the reality that presumably Republican voters are aware of all that, or aware of the legal peril, or aware of almost everything that's been going on for 2 years, and yet you still have to go through a just completely daunting polling lead that the former president has right now. So how do you square that?
Well, look, because as we were talking about right before we got on air, I don't think that the American people are really focused on this quite yet. You know, we all are focused on it, but I don't think they are yet. And so I think the first debate, whether he's there or he isn't, will start to kick this off. That happens on August 23rd. And then people get back to school, kids are back to school, people are back to work, and they start to say, okay, what's going on here? And, I'm someone who understands, having been involved in this game as long as I have, that if you have a message that you think is honest, forthright, and direct, you just got to keep at it. And let's remember, from yesterday, July 31st, no one's voting for 6 more months. So how about we give people that 6 months of time? We also have this instant gratification society where we're like, okay, let's just decide now. Well, all these polls say if the election were held today, and the one thing I know for sure is the election isn't held today, not anywhere. So let's keep at it. And it's not like his situation is going to get better. It's just going to continue to get worse. And if he has spent $40 million in the first 6 months of this year on his legal fees, and he's been indicted on 2 cases, what are his legal fees going to be? And by the way, those 2 poor guys who are his co-defendants.
I was going to say, it's not just his legal fees, it's for all of them.
Right.
Yeah.
And all these other witnesses that he has to continue to pay for. How long will he continue to do that? And if he doesn't, Becky, will they not turn on him and testify against him?
Chris, Andrew is down at Uber headquarters because he's about to interview Dara Khosrowshahi, but he has a question, too.
All right.
Andrew?
Hey, Governor, I got 2 questions for you. One is you've obviously been very outspoken against the former president, President Trump.
Hold up a second. Maybe play that to the floor. Yeah, now. Okay. I think you can hear now.
All right.
Great. Thanks. Governor, I have 2 questions for you. One is you've been very outspoken against the former president. The CEO community, investors, other folks with great wealth that donate have not been nearly as outspoken as you. In fact, most are very, very quiet. They may privately share a lot of the same views that you do, but they have not said them publicly and taken a sort of leadership position in this race yet. And so many of them, frankly, I think are scared to say things that are similar to what you may be thinking and they may be thinking. What do you tell them?
Well, what I say to all of them when I speak to them is, it's either now or never. And if they're counting on, events to do their work for them, I think this is a real risk. And that's why I got into the race, Andrew, is that I'm not going to let this just, go on its own. Someone has to drive this argument and who knows how to do it. I do, having been a prosecutor for 7 years. I know how to drive this argument. I know what the facts are, and I continue to present the facts to the American people. And other people need to chime in here. So for all those, men and women who are leaders of our business community who are watching this morning, you can't count on me to do it by myself. You all have to join in and do it as well, both in terms of who you decide to donate to, whether it's me or somebody else who's given the same message, or whether you just do it yourselves in terms of coming on the air and talking about these things. But whispering his name and treating him like Voldemort in the Harry Potter books, he who shall not be named, is not going to get this job done.
Right. The other thing I was going to say is you've really staked out ground, I don't want to say in a reactionary way, but I think people want to understand not just what you're against, which may be President Trump, but what you're for in terms of specifically the way the business community thinks. I think so many of them are, fiscally conservative. They may be a little bit more socially liberal than others in the party. How do you think about that?
Well, we talk about it all the time, Andrew. It's just that the stuff that I say about Trump is much more entertaining to cover. So when I go on an interview and people either ask me those questions and I answer forthrightly, but let's be clear. We have to stop the incredible spending that we're doing at the government level. It's what caused this inflation, as you all know, and prices are still 17% higher than they were when Joe Biden became president. We have an educational system that's failing us at the K-12 level in every way. And the statistics this year are down even more than they were the year before. We need to present educational freedom options for every parent, no matter what your income level is in this country. We need to look at what we're doing in our cities and restore our cities. And I'm a former prosecutor, so on crime, if cities like this one we're sitting in right now, in Manhattan, if Alvin Bragg doesn't want to do his job, well, I'm going to appoint U.S. attorneys here in Brooklyn and Manhattan who are going to go and get violent criminals off the streets and put them in federal prison if Alvin Bragg won't put them in state prison here, as he should be doing, and clean up what's going on in our cities, because we can't be a great country without great cities. And finally, on the border, we need to interdict fentanyl. We need to make sure that we're not having 110,000 overdose deaths a year, and we need to make sure that our border is safe and secure, and then reform the immigration system so we can fill some of the 8 million open jobs we have here in America with people who want to come here legally, work hard, and grow our economy.
Chris, let me ask you about negotiations with the drug companies, with the government. That starts September 1st is when the negotiation's supposed to start. We had Merck CEO on earlier this morning talking about earnings, but talking about this too. He says, look, it's not a negotiation, it's price fixing, but you do have Americans paying more than any other nation for their drugs that they are getting. We're paying for the innovation of the world. You don't want to see the innovation cut off, but how do you deal with making sure that Americans aren't getting squeezed by it?
Well, how about if the politicians really dealt with what are the cost drivers in this system, right? You do not hear any politician come on this air and talk about the PBMs. The pharmacy benefit managers. They are taking from anywhere from 50 to 70% of the rebates that pharmaceutical companies mean to go to the customer, and they're taking them purely to be middlemen. It's not sexy, Becky.
Why don't the drug companies just cut the list price then and cut out the need for a middleman in the whole thing?
Well, I think they're going to need help from the government to be able to do that. These pharmacy benefit managers have been so entrenched in it. Look, they're not without.
Johnson & Johnson's CFO said too.
Right. And look, and Becky, they're not without fault. Okay. Yeah. I got to tell you the truth. I don't need another pharmaceutical television commercial. No offense to the way you guys make money, but someone will buy those TV ads. But I got to tell you the truth. Is there a man over 60 in America who needs like another Cialis commercial? Like, we get it. We know it's available. It's all good, right? I mean, so American people look at that and they say, well, you're wasting your money on that. What the pharmaceutical companies, and I've told them this, should be talking about much more is their innovation and the fact that, by the way, Americans get access to the greatest medicines first. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason for that is the investment that our companies make in research and development
I don't want
here.
to kill the innovation. Trust me, I don't want to kill the innovation.
And so,
but it's broken. I mean, Ken Frazier at one point talked about how he tried to take this on when he was CEO, and he couldn't just do the list prices. There's an entire system set up that ends it.
And that's what I mean. It's look, you can't just do it that way. And nobody in the political world has wanted to take on the PBMs. Nobody's wanted to do it. And we did it in New Jersey. We're the first state that wound up doing a reverse auction for those managers. We cut our costs, Becky, just for state workers, $500 million a year by doing a reverse auction. If the government started to get involved in making sure that everybody in this system was treated fairly, we could reduce those prices without price fixing that will lead to a reduction in innovation.
Chris, come back. We should talk more about this, but thank you for your time
Happy
today.
to. Guys, thanks for having me.
Former Governor Chris Christie.